Italy is seen by many as a vacation paradise, but living there is not desirable. In the past, Italy was the economic powerhouse of Europe, as it stood unchallenged as a manufacturing leader in the global economy. However, Italy's economic growth rate has slowed dramatically from an average annual GDP growth rate of 5% in the 1960s to just 0.6% in 2023, making it one of the lowest growth rates in the European Union. Now, Italy finds itself grappling with severe economic challenges which affect many Italians. So what happened? And why does Italy have a big problem? The drastic decline in GDP has led Italy into a debt crisis, with the combined private and public debt surpassing a staggering 137.3% of GDP. This debt crisis means that a significant portion of Italy's budget goes toward paying off debt, leaving less room for investment in crucial areas like education, infrastructure, and healthcare. High debt levels also lead to higher borrowing costs, making it more expensive for the government to finance new projects and stifling economic growth. And as if that's not enough, Italy's aging population is exacerbating the issue. The working age population, which is about 23 million in 2024, has been declining rapidly, with statistics projecting a further 10% decline by 2030. This demographic crisis will only worsen the debt burden, as a shrinking workforce will struggle to support a growing elderly population. Political instability has also plagued Italy, with 6 different governments since 2018 failing to address the country's economic woes. The current government, led by Giorgia Meloni, is struggling to implement meaningful reforms. Meloni's administration has attempted to introduce measures such as tax cuts to stimulate growth, incentives for businesses to invest in innovation, and policies aimed at reducing bureaucratic red tape. However, these efforts have so far failed to produce significant or lasting change. Italy's economic struggles are not just a recent phenomenon. They're the result of a dramatic and tumultuous history. The seeds of today's debt crisis and other economic woes were planted decades ago through a series of pivotal events and decisions that have led the current state of affairs. Post-World War II, Italy experienced an economic miracle that transformed it from an agrarian society to an industrialized nation. However, this growth was not sustainable, and the country's economy began to slow in the 1980s. As the economy slowed, the government began to borrow heavily to finance its growing welfare state and infrastructure projects. This debt accumulation started in the 1970s and was further exacerbated by key events such as the 1970s oil crisis and the 1990s European monetary system crisis. The government's reliance on borrowing became a habit, and that's what led to a staggering national debt of over $3 billion, which has grown unchecked. With a debt to GDP ratio surpassing 137%, Italy's financial situation is dire, and the weight of this debt is crippling the country's economic growth, with interest payments accounting for a significant chunk of the country's budget. But as this economic shift happened, Italy also experienced a demographic shift that began in the 1960s, with the total fertility rate, TFR, plummeting from 2.4 children per woman in 1960 to about 1.3 in 2023, one of the lowest in the world. Meanwhile, the proportion of people aged 65 and older grew from 12% in 1960 to over 24% in 2020, with projections indicating that this age group will reach 35% of the population by 2050. This drastic change has resulted in a severely aging population, with significant implications for Italy's economic and social structures. Italy had to implement socio-economic policies, such as generous pension plans and family benefits, which further deepened the demographic crisis. These policies encouraged early retirement, reducing the working age population, and made it financially easier for families to have fewer children, accelerating the decline in birth rates. But what I would call the saddest impact on Italians is that as these things happened, frequent changes in government complicated the situation, with a lack of direction and coordination in economic policy making. For example, the education system, which was once considered one of the best in the world, declined significantly over the past few decades. Why? Government funding issues and centralization problems caused a lack of resources and autonomy for schools. This decline has resulted in a poorly educated workforce, unable to compete in the global economy. Currently, Italy spends just about 1% of its GDP on tertiary education, compared to the OECD average of 1.45%. Consequently, only 29% of young Italians have a university degree, well below the OECD average of 47%. This decline in educational quality and investment has had far-reaching consequences for Italy's economic growth and competitiveness. With a poorly educated workforce, Italy has struggled to adapt to the changing global economy, relying heavily on low-skilled labor and failing to innovate and diversify its industries. As a result, Italy's productivity growth has stagnated, and its GDP per capita has fallen behind that of other developed economies. The lack of investment in education has also led to a significant brain drain. Over the last decade, about 400,000 graduates have left Italy in search of better opportunities in countries like the UK, Germany, and France. Meanwhile, only 50,000 similarly qualified foreigners have moved to Italy. This exodus has deprived the country of the skills and talent needed to drive innovation and economic growth. The combination of a poorly educated workforce, a brain drain, and a lack of investment in education has had a devastating impact on Italy's economic prospects. This has led to a significant decline in Italy's economic growth, productivity, and competitiveness, making it one of the poorest performers in the EU. Italy's GDP per capita is 32% lower than the EU average, and its economic growth rate is half the EU average. To address these pressing issues, the Italian government has implemented several initiatives. However, these efforts have been largely inadequate. Despite introducing budget adjustments and incentives for families and businesses, the government's attempts to stimulate growth and reform the economy have fallen short. Structural problems like sluggish bureaucracy, complex tax systems, and rigid labor laws continue to stifle business growth and innovation, making it difficult for Italy to recover from its economic struggles. One major reason for Italy's economic struggles is the deep-rooted structural problems within the government and economy. Italy's bureaucracy is slow and creates a challenging environment for business growth and innovation. The country's complex tax system and labor laws make it especially tough for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, to thrive. There are many layers of taxes at different levels, leading to confusing rules and regulations. For example, Italy's tax system can be so harsh that a worker earning just above the average wage might face a marginal tax rate of 116%, meaning a pay raise could actually result in less take-home pay. This discourages career advancement and makes it hard for businesses to raise wages or hire more staff. These issues create significant barriers to economic recovery and growth. In contrast, other countries have implemented successful economic policies. Take Germany, for example. They have maintained a strong commitment to fiscal discipline, which has kept their debt to GDP ratio relatively low. This approach has led to higher investor confidence and lower borrowing costs. More importantly, Germany invests heavily in innovation and research, putting 3.14% of their GDP into R&D in 2023, compared to Italy's 1.45%. This heavy investment helps German businesses stay competitive in the global market. Italy's lower spending on innovation and technological advancement, which is among the lowest in the EU, makes it hard for the country to keep up in a rapidly changing world. And here's another reason. Italy's economy continues to struggle. The labor market is a fragmented landscape where competition and innovation often take a back seat. This is because 95% of Italian firms are SMEs that are frequently family-owned. These SMEs account for 80% of Italy's employment. This prevalence of small, family-run businesses comes with its own set of challenges. Many struggle to scale up operations due to limited access to finance, difficulties in adopting new technologies, and regulatory constraints. The level of digitalization among Italian SMEs lags behind that of other EU countries. The European Commission's DESI 2022 report even ranked Italy 18th out of 27 EU countries in digitalization, with a score of 49.3, which is below the European average of 52.3. This hampers their ability to innovate and maintain a competitive edge in the global market. Furthermore, these family-owned businesses are usually less competitive due to their informal nature and small size. Of course, these enterprises are undoubtedly the backbone of Italy's economy, but their struggles to adapt and modernize will continue to pose a structural hurdle that limits the effectiveness of government policies aimed at boosting growth and competitiveness. As Italy grapples with its economic woes, the government's policies and approaches have proven inadequate to address the complexity and magnitude of the issues. Despite efforts to revitalize the economy, such as investing in infrastructure and industry, these measures have been hindered by bureaucratic inefficiencies, corruption, and a lack of political will to drive meaningful change. To truly address its economic struggles, Italy needs to implement profound and far-reaching reforms that tackle structural and cultural barriers head-on. This includes streamlining regulations, increasing investment in education and research, and fostering a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. However, the government's inability to enact these reforms is largely due to political fragmentation, special interest groups, and a lack of consensus among stakeholders. This leaves Italy's economic future uncertain, and its citizens, businesses, and society as a whole to bear the consequences. Hopefully, something changes soon.